Hey guys, this is Mark. Uh, I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to go live because I didn't realize that I was going to have time to do that, but I do. I do have about 15 minutes, and I'm going to do more live videos uh, because I keep getting requests for that. And so I will be doing more live videos, but this is going to be a fairly short one today. And I got a question from this is a husband with ASD, and he's basically asking, how can I uh, discuss things with my NT wife without losing my shit? And so I'm guessing that he's having a hard time problem solving relationship difficulties with his NT wife without he does some version of meltdown or shutdown or false agreement, which would be where he might say, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. Just hurry up and end the conversation. Or maybe he's running into a situation where I just call it the shutdown, where his brain literally short circuits. So there's really four things that happen. If you, let's say you are the ASD spouse, you have a hard time discussing relationship problems with your NT spouse. Usually the outcome is four things: some version of a meltdown, which is your anxiety is like super high and you're having a hard time regulating your emotions. There's the shutdown, which is basically your attempt to avoid a meltdown. That's where you just go away because you don't even want to talk. Then there is, so that's meltdown is fight, shutdown is flight, but then there's two versions of freeze. One is false agreement, where you just agree and go along just to hurry up and then get the conversation over with. Although in some cases you're willing to follow through, but the main goal is just get it over with. And then there is the short circuit, where you are literally in some version of fight or flight, and your brain's just not functioning very well. Your prefrontal cortex has kind of shut down. Your amygdala is now flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. The hindbrain is fully engaged. And so in those cases, you can only will yourself to maybe just listen to 75% of what she's saying. And then of that 75%, you're probably only going to be able to remember 50%. And of that 50%, you're only going to retain 25%, making these numbers up, but it's pretty close. And of that 25%, you may only follow through with 5% of what she's asking you to do. So we have fight, which is the meltdown, flight, shutdown. We have freeze, which would be false agreement and short circuiting. So to avoid all of that, you would want to request that she do a few things. Some very common things that I ran into is she will want to talk right now because it's something very important to her, and she will interrupt you in the middle of you doing something that's important to you. And so that is often a stumbling block to communication. So ask your NT wife, you say, and here's a script for you: unless it's emergent, please give me a heads up that you need to talk about something that may turn out to be a difficult topic, where we might be at risk of me doing a shutdown, meltdown, or false agreement. So say, just give me a heads up. It's not going to eliminate my anxiety, but it'll reduce it because I'm not going to be interrupted. Another thing you can ask her to do, if you're really serious about establishing communication without you doing your meltdown or shutdown, you can ask her to keep the conversations relatively short. I'm not faulting the NTYs, but sometimes they go on 30, 45, 90 minutes. And to the NTYs listening to this, you lost him way back at the 10-minute mark. If his anxiety is up and you go over 10 minutes roughly, you're going to get very little return on your investment of time and energy trying to get your message across to him because you lost him. Okay, so another thing you can do as the autistic spouse, since your NT spouse is very intuitive and socially and emotionally smart, sometimes she speaks in neurotypical, high intuitive language that comes off to you as very vague. If you have ASD level 1, you're going to have some mind blindness, some emotions blindness, some executive function deficits, and anxiety. And if she's very, she can talk to her girlfriends and they're very intuitive, and she can say things and they will totally get it. She could say that same thing to you, the ASD husband in this case, and a lot of that was seen very vague. So ask her to be very concrete. Just be very specific. Don't expect me to read your mind, read your heart, and to be as intuitive as you. Another thing you can ask your NT wife to do, if you're really serious about establishing communication, is to ask her not to come at you when she's already upset. Now, I know sometimes, we're only human. Sometimes she's going to want to talk right now and have an emotional vomit in your lap, and she's pissed right now and she's going to talk right now. Okay, sometimes that's going to happen. But it would be the thing to do to ask her that, the other 90% of the time when you're mad, would you do me a favor and calm down before you want to try to talk to me? Because I'll pick up on your being angry. I will short circuit, and now I will not be able to listen, understand, or retain because I'm paying more attention to your voice inflection and your angry face than the words coming out of your mouth. If you have ASD level 1, you're going to have some some level of alexithymia, which is emotions blindness. So another thing you could do if you really want to try to establish communication with your NT wife, ask her, can we speak in terms of needs? Will you just tell me what you need instead of in terms of feelings? Because if you say, well, I feel this way about such and such, and you expect me to know what I'm supposed to do based on how you feel, I'm probably not going to get it. So ask her to speak in terms of needs rather than feelings. Another thing that's a huge trigger for, in this case, husbands with ASD, is when the NT wife brings up the past that you can't fix now. Now, sometimes she's just going to have an emotional vomit. She's going to have to bring up the past because she still hasn't quite gotten over it, and she's just going to have to vent. So sometimes that's just going to happen. But the other 90% of the time, you can ask her, if it's something that I can fix now, currently, that was a past issue, that's fair game, bring it up. If it's something that there's no way we can rewind the clock and I go back and fix it now, then ask her, just please don't bring it up unless you just have to vent. In which case, I'll try to listen. There's not going to get any problem solving done in that case, though. I guess the only other thing I would say to the guy that asked this question is, I'm not faulting the NT wife, but a lot of times she will bring up multiple topics in one conversation, and you will not do well with that. And so also she's very intuitive, and she'll bring up problem 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D, and she thinks it's all one problem. But to the ASD mind, who has some executive function deficits, that's 4 different problems. So that the NT wife's listening, don't bring up problem 1A, B, C, and D. Because that's going to seem like 4 things. His brain's going to crack around problem 2, and you lose again. So to the ASD husbands in here, ask your wife, can we stay to one topic in one conversation so that I don't get lost? Okay? So there you go. We've talked about interruptions, conversations that run on. She's vague. She wants to talk while she's upset. She wants to bring up the unfixable past. And she brings up too many topics, which you may view as data dumping, and you can't keep up with it. Okay. She's a multitasker in the emotional and social sense. You are not. So those are 7 things that you can do as an autistic husband to establish communication without doing meltdown, shutdown, false agreement, or your brain just short circuits. So I wish I had more time. There are some comments over here. My husband thinks everything, Megs says, my husband thinks everything is a confrontation. But that's because he's high anxiety. And it's almost excruciatingly impossible for him to talk about relationship difficulties because he views that as there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with us, you're being parental, you're talking down to me, you're mad at me, you're upset with me. His self-esteem is already in the toilet before he met you. And so when you even say a neutral thing to him, he will run the risk of downloading that as criticism. So that's why any conversations about resolving some relationship issues is super difficult. And that's why I'm doing this video. So that if the guys watching this, ASD spouses watch this video, maybe you won't view conversations with your NT wife as confrontation. Uh, let's see. My Asperger's journey says, I'm ASD and I'm the one that brings up the unfixable past. Okay. Well, you know, I gave, for all intents and purposes, I told you a little bit ago that your NT wife may bring up the unfixable past because sometimes she just needs to vent. And you would want her to vent. You don't want her to bottle that stuff up because the longer she bottles it up, the more that explosion is going to crack your brain. So sometimes you just have to vent. And to the NT wives watching that bring up the unfixable past because they just need to vent, and to the ASD spouses that do the same thing, you don't beat up on yourself and oh, I shouldn't have did that. No, you just go, okay, well, everybody has a weak moment. Everybody deserves to have a bad day, and everybody deserves to vent every once in a while. So when the other person is in a one down position because they need to vent and they're hurting inside, it would be best for the other spouse to go, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to be the strong one in this moment because this person is really hurt and they need to vent. And I'm just going to sit here and take it. I know that sounds hard. You're extending some grace and mercy and compassion in that moment. Why would you want to do that? Because someday it's going to be all the other way around. Someday you're going to need to vent, and you would want her to sit there and listen with a very compassionate, graceful, merciful listening ear, right? Catherine said, yes, self-esteem troubled for a lifetime and not being understood. Yeah, a lot of these guys couldn't fit in from day one, labeled problem children by parents, labeled problem students by teachers, labeled as odd by their peers. Many of them were ostracized, bullied, teased, couldn't quite fit in. And a lot of them just gave up. Okay, I'm no good at this social game. I'll just engage in non-social tasks and activities, and I'll just tend to myself and isolate, and I'll entertain myself. And then they grow up as an adult, and they're still doing that same thing. And so when you're married to an autistic spouse and you feel like he's not a team player, he's a solo player who just happens to be married, he learned to go solo way back as a child. Everybody deserves to have a bad day. That's right, Catherine. I got a couple more minutes here. Megs, I would like to hear what I have to say about men who were abused as a child. Most of them were on the receiving end of some kind of abuse. So I would say 90% plus were abused. Now, there's going to be different levels of severity. Some were physically abused. So I wouldn't have time to get into that one. The conversation we would have about that would be the same conversation that you would have about any child that was physically abused. But most ASD men were on the receiving end of some version of emotional abuse. And even if we don't want to use a strong word like emotional abuse, we could use something a little muted. They were always on the receiving end of disapproval from parents, teachers, peers. Then they become an adult, get married to the NT wife. Things go well for a while. He starts to distance himself. Then the NT wife now, her heart's in the right place. She's wanting to keep the marriage together. But now he views this, here's yet another person. I'm on the receiving end of disapproval. So he's been on the receiving end of disapproval to one degree or another his entire life. That's significantly less problematic than physical abuse. Okay. I will go longer next time. And I'll try to give you a heads up too, because I'm just a surprise. I'm going live. So I will I will be doing more live videos, I promise. And also give you a heads up when it's going to happen. So I think we'll stop for now. So I wanted to answer that question from the guy, how can I discuss difficult topics without losing my shit? Is basically what he was asking. And so hopefully the ideas that I gave you will facilitate communication so that you're willing to engage. You're not going to shut down or melt down. You're willing to listen. So the only other thing I would say to the men out there with autism is when you're discussing things with your wife, listen to understand rather than to mount a defense. Go into the discussion thinking, okay, I'm going to do my best to not offer my opinion about her opinion, not to make her wrong, not to view her message delivery as she's trying to be critical. I'm going to listen to understand. And so active listening is I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to look in her direction. I'm going to nod while she's talking. And periodically, you're going to paraphrase back what she said. So anyone I hear you saying is such and such. If she goes, no, that's not what I mean. Okay, well, then you can say, would you mind repeating it? Slightly different wordage, because I want to get it. She could repeat it. And you go, okay, so what I hear you saying is da 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 da. She'll go, yes, that's what I mean. Okay, so that proves understanding. You paraphrase back using your words, and she says, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Then that proves understanding. So now you have listened. You were present during the conversation. You paraphrase back, which proves understanding. If you want to go an extra mile, you could validate and go, okay, you know what? I respect the fact that that's your truth. I hear you. I understand you because you said my paraphrase was right. And I respect the fact that that's your opinion. So that's way different than listening to get ready to say what you're going to say. I'm listening to understand. I'm turning it into an experiment. I'm turning it into a project. The project being, I want to listen to understand, even in spite of the fact that some of the things he's saying might trigger me. Okay. So that's probably over. I probably over answered that question. But anyway, it's okay. So we'll end this now. And again, I promise I'll do more lives and I'll give you a heads up that we're doing. And thank you for the comments over there. I'll look through this and respond when I can find some time. Thanks, guys. See ya.